All right, so fired up to have Ryan Randall with us today. Ryan's going to share a little bit more about really what's possible with AI and what businesses are doing and how they're looking at some of the more advanced aspects of what's possible. So Ryan is a fellow technology startup founder here in New Hampshire. We're actually both in the New Hampshire Builders Group that we started, and Ryan's just a wealth of knowledge, and so super excited to have him with us. And Ryan, appreciate you doing this, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack.
All right. So Ryan, maybe if you want to give a little bit of a background, a little bit of your background. So you're an engineer, you're a software engineer. You've worked at large companies, and now you've come and started the small company, right? Startup.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about just your journey, so folks understand kind of your background and the work that you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have worked primarily at large companies, and before I started this company, for the past probably 7 years at those companies, I ended up building content management systems for those companies. And that was fun. You get to build a platform and you get to see large clients using that platform, kind of getting exposure to some really interesting problems that you wouldn't see at maybe like a startup. And at some point later on, AI started to pop up. In particular, GPT-3.5 came out,
Yeah.
and
23.
yeah, it was
2024, right?
like, yeah, I think maybe the end of 22 or
Yeah.
yeah. And started to play around with it, and I was like, oh man, this is like super cool. And we had like a hackathon, and I was working in the hackathon. We were actually building something for the CMS. We were building like a little chatbot
Yeah.
for the CMS, and we were actually like, you would type something into the chatbot and it would actually do something in the CMS. So we were taking that like English input and then
Early agent, right?
early agent, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't know agent wasn't even like the
Yeah.
term at that point. But we demoed it and people were like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then at some point I was like, oh, this is really cool. Wanted to kind of dive into it more. And I think companies at that point too were like, we don't know where this is going. Like, this isn't reliable at all.
Yeah.
And so very hesitant to adopt. And I wanted to dive more into that. So
Yeah.
started my own
Awesome.
startup.
No, love it, man. Sounds great. And we'll definitely jam more on AgentMark as we're going through the conversation too. I think one place I wanted to start is really around, again, I think the theme for this is going to be kind of what's possible and how do we get reliable AI in production.
Yep.
But for teams that, have adopted chatbots, maybe just give us a flavor of what's possible beyond just having a chatbot that's plugged in your organization's knowledge, right? Like, as we're talking about the world of automation, as we're talking about building custom agents, like, give us a little bit of an overview again, especially for some of our family enterprises and leadership teams that are listening. What's possible today that wasn't possible 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think that one of the biggest breakout use cases that we've seen in the industry has been coding agents.
Yeah.
So, and software engineering, which is a field I've been in, has always been thought of as, it's difficult, it's complex. And so to see these coding agents come in and be able to do a lot of the things that we used to do, like that's pretty cool. And it's dominating a large part of the industry. Now pretty much every company is using these. And so that's the big breakout case. And now we're starting to see that applied to all other aspects. And agents kind of come in many different flavors. Some are more autonomous and some are less autonomous.
Yeah.
The more autonomous ones, I think typically you want to make sure you have some kind of like a human kind of interacting with them.
Yeah.
So the agent may go off and do something, and then you want to have a human kind of be able to validate that it's doing the right thing. And then, sorry, what was your question? Coming back to that.
Yeah. Well, no. So we were just talking about, applied AI use cases, and really where, what's possible in the world of agents.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things possible in the world of agents. I think the question becomes, how much autonomy do you want to give them and how much trust can you give them?
Yeah.
So if you were to go off into like the finance world or or the healthcare world,
Yeah.
yes, there are things possible with them, but how much risk are you willing to take on? And right
Totally.
now, I think a lot of companies are saying we only have a certain risk tolerance,
Yeah.
so we're not going to let them access all the healthcare records and all that stuff. Um, but the world is, I think, agents can solve a lot of the problems right now that people are still doing.
Yeah.
But they're still kind of getting better. Um, they're still improving them. So I think right now I don't know, it's a very vague answer, I guess. But
Yeah, no, but I think it gives, like, it's just generally to kind of give us an overview of like what, how different companies are looking at it, how different use cases are. And so I think it's definitely helpful there. Um, around a lot of the work that you've been doing on teams have understood that there's custom work that needs to be done. There's a lot of maybe manual processes where it's touching their CRM or it's touching their ERP or it's touching their point of sale, right? Like they have all these siloed systems, and automation is this incredible way to really, not just unify the data of the organization, but also to make systems talk to each other in ways that they couldn't before, right?
yeah,
And so I'd love if maybe you could share a little bit more around, you know, how maybe the basics of how an agent works, and then how can an agent kind of plug into the existing systems just like people do. I think that description might be really helpful for folks.
yeah, absolutely. So an agent is really, so I guess stepping back for a second, before agents, really we saw there were LLMs. And so LLMs were, you would talk to like ChatGPT or something, and it would give you a text
Yeah,
response. Um, and, uh, and that was great. But they're limited in terms of what they could do.
totally. Yeah,
Um, at some point too, we started to integrate like workflows. So this could be something that's maybe it creates blog posts. So maybe it researches a topic
yeah,
and then it says, okay, I found enough research on this topic that I want, and it'll output some content for it,
sure.
and then you post it. So maybe it's a 3-step process,
Yeah.
and so that would be like a workflow. It's still using an LLM, uh, but it's not quite an agent, meaning it's not fully autonomous and making all
Meaning that there's not a trigger. Is that essentially kind of what you're saying in that where it's not fully autonomous?
so when I say not fully autonomous, I mean an agent is kind of the next level up. So an agent would be you give it access to like tools,
Sure.
and then you say you make the decisions in terms of what to do, and it'll often run that in a loop until it meets some kind of a goal.
Got it.
Um, so you could give it, for example, with the blog post, instead of doing this 3-step process, you could say, hey, you have a research tool,
Yeah.
you can write stuff, and then you say, hey, write me a blog on this topic. And it might research like 10 different things, go
Yeah.
off and all this stuff, and then
Yeah.
eventually come back, write that article. And so an agent just has a lot more autonomy in terms of,
Yeah.
the over its decision process. Um, and it gets tricky at that point.
And so, really, one big unlock of agents is that you can give them specific context. You can give them all kinds of tool access. And so, instead of just having your Claude or ChatGPT go and run on its own, you're able to be much more specific about kind of the specialization of each agent.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I think you can with agents. I think the tricky part, yes, you can give it access to like all of these tools, but the tricky part is going to be like making sure it does the thing right, making
Yeah.
sure it does that thing. The quality is good, or it does it reliably. So you really want to kind of find that balance between, okay, here's full autonomy and just go do stuff, versus like, what's the goal we're trying to solve? How do we measure that success of
Yeah.
that goal?
And so I don't know if like folks in the audience, some may have heard of evals or some may have heard of, other ways of testing. And so keeping it, kind of high level, Ryan, like how do you look at testing and monitoring the performance of AI employees or AI agents?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question, and that gets at the heart of what every business wants to come in and say, I want to build an agent.
Yeah.
Like, great. What does that? How are you evaluating its output? And if your answer is like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I prompt it and I look at the right. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Then that's going to be tricky.
yeah,
And that may work, but only if it's like you who are using it. Like
yeah,
if it's your customers that are using this agent and they're
yeah.
interacting with
Agents
it.
as a product as opposed to agents as like an internal.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Agents internal is going to be potentially an easier problem for you to manage than agents as a product. So agents as a product, you want to, if you were to take like pencil and paper and look at the agent's output and then say, okay, this scored high here, this scored high here,
yeah,
like, and you can do that for all kinds of outputs. And you can also think through, hey, what if my customer starts or client, like they start putting bad stuff in there? Like, am I handling that?
yeah.
Um,
And that could be like prompt injection or something like. Is that what you
It
mean?
could be
Yeah.
that. Yeah. It could be bad data. It could be, I think there was something recently where like folks were interacting with like Chipotle's AI
Yeah, and
thing.
they're using it
like,
as free. Yeah, I
yes,
saw that. Yeah, yeah. It's like I will order burrito if you tell me the answer to this question, right?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So stuff like that, you want to be able to really understand what's good, what's bad, and you want to try to capture that as much as you can, and have a human, someone who's an expert on the matter, be able to define that good and bad.
and maybe go one level deeper, Ryan, on how are teams and how do you help teams do this today? How do they go from just having an agent that works to having something that is being monitored effectively? It's kind of fine tuned for the specific use cases you want it to have. How does that process, like what's the first couple steps that a team take in terms of going through the evaluation process for a specific agent?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say after we've defined like a specific problem for the company, and they may have that already. And then we start. So once that problem is defined, we would probably build some kind of a prototype around it. And then typically, I would create somewhere between like 20 to 50 test cases around that, and I would be able to feed that into the agent, and then make sure that's getting the output that I would
Yeah,
expect.
yeah,
And I'm not when I come in to help like a company, like I'm not an expert on their problems
yeah. You
always.
don't have the domain expertise, but you have the technological
Right,
expertise. Yeah,
exactly. So I would learn the domain expertise from them. I would be able to create these test sets, and then eventually it gets to a point where you're like, okay, that's good enough.
yeah,
Now, once if you're releasing like that agent as a product that's customer facing, ideally you'd want to release it to maybe not every customer,
yeah,
but if you do release it to every customer, and regardless if you do or you don't, you want to have some kind of monitoring system in place. So you want to be able to see, here's all the inputs that it's getting, here's all the outputs, and then ideally you want to be able to kind of evaluate that stuff
yeah.
as that comes in and out.
And so I think what Ryan's kind of explaining there is that there is ways that you can kind of trace the performance in the responses that people are doing. So you're not just having a customer service chatbot out in the world, right? It's you're able to see how are people interacting with it, how are people responding to it. I think Ryan's guidance there on you know, ideally you can release it to a subset of customers, maybe folks that you know well, and they can give you some kind of honest feedback on it. Like it's not like it's an all or nothing of you have to roll this out to everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah.
You and I were having an interesting conversation before we started around prioritizing, right? And I think especially if teams decide to go the route of building custom agents in certain businesses where there's a lot more things that are you call it business case specific.
Yep.
A lot of times that is the path where the highest upside is. How do you look at encouraging teams on what to prioritize, and really, where they can get the most bang for their buck?
Yeah, I would say if I was coming in a company and they didn't have like a defined problem, maybe, and they were trying to reason about how do I even start using
Yeah.
AI and everything,
Yeah.
I would say don't start with agents. Agents are really the last place you would
Yeah.
go. I would,
But oftentimes where there can be a lot of high upside.
they're good,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But they're difficult, and I
For sure.
would, if you have a team, maybe a technical team, and most of them, I mean, agents have been around for like 2 years, so most of them are not going to be super familiar with them.
Yeah.
So like, it's good to start with just LLMs, using LLMs and
And
LLMs.
just that's Claude, that's OpenAI.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and you can use Claude or OpenAI to potentially help solve, a decent amount of your problems. And
Yeah.
you can use it in code too. So it's a little bit more automated.
Yeah.
It can still integrate with maybe some of the problems that you do have. They might just be smaller in scale, but typically they're easier to measure. So they're easier to measure the quality of it. They're easier to debug and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually you start moving into the workflows that I mentioned earlier, where maybe it's just like a 3-step process. It does some research,
Yeah.
and then it writes something, and then it posts it or
And
something.
maybe at a simple level, maybe that's even just creating like a custom GPT in Claude, right? Which any non-technical person can do in chat, right? And it's able to, give you a little bit agent light, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of you saying, here's some tools, and then, go use them however you want,
Yeah.
you say, hey, just use this thing at this point, and
Yeah.
then, so. Um,
And then
and-
maybe what's agent heavy? Like give folks a look into kind of what's agent heavy.
yeah, so agent heavy would be you give an LLM access to tools, and these tools can be,
What are some examples of, yeah.
so often now what LLMs are using is they're using tools that live on the computer. And these are tools that allow the LLM to write code. They allow them to execute code. They allow them to like perform web search. So all these things, and those are like building blocks to basically be doing whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah.
So the world's your oyster, but
Yeah.
also a lot of risk
Yes.
with that.
Yeah.
If you have it writing code and like all this stuff, a lot of things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of times you want to do is, what I would recommend for companies is you want to assign human ownership even to an agent. And so, depending on the agent itself, maybe it's an agent that's a chatbot, or maybe it's writing code.
Yeah.
But typically you want to have a human own its output.
Totally.
And often you'll want to have some kind of a human in the loop, meaning an agent maybe before it
Making sure it's on track, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe before it sends that email,
Yeah.
it sends it over to Susan, and then Susan says, "Yeah, that looks good."
But just like a bright junior employee, right? In the sense that, you're not just going to let someone new in the company, as bright as they might be, just go out and run at full speed on day one, right?
Yep.
And I think it's very similar, the same thing in agents, you might say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times you can integrate them with maybe some of your existing tooling. So maybe you're using Slack across your company or email, and the agent can actually talk to you on those platforms, and you can kind of get the approval process, everything else. But agent heavy would really be, proceed with caution. There's a lot of upside, but there's also a lot of risk involved.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In terms of agents and systems that are able to get better over time as the organization gets more data, there's able to be kind of a feedback loop.
Mhm.
Talk to folks around kind of what's possible there around basically systems that can get better, agents that can get better over time.
Yep.
And I think that's, sometimes as business leaders, we may not always think of that's a compounding capability of AI is that as you get more exposure and more data and more context, the systems get better and better.
Yep. Yeah.
If they're built right.
If they're built right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So basically, when you release an agent, let's say for the first time, you typically want to have some level of confidence that's going to do the right things. But once it starts interacting with customers or whoever, you're going to find new cases, like you said. It's going to run into new things that you just didn't know. So, edge cases, people interact with it in ways you didn't understand, or even the models can drift over time. And so you want to be able to have all of that data and then be able to ideally evaluate it as it's coming in and saying, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
And for anything that's bad, you'd want to have some way to get that feedback back into your system, fix it, and then bring it back out. So, have that agent improve over time.
Got it.
And so the quicker you do that, typically the better your agents are going to perform over time, the happier your customers are going to be. I think, like Claude, OpenAI, like these companies have probably very, very good feedback loops.
Yeah.
And so depending on whatever agent you're building, you typically want to make sure that you have access to that data that your customers are interacting with. Anything that is not performing well or as expected or just wrong, you'd want to be able to save that, fix it, make sure that that never happens again,
Yeah.
and then send that agent out, that upgraded agent out.
I got one more question for you, Ryan. And again, really grateful for you being here and willing to jam and share some of your knowledge with folks across the state. But for teams that don't have, giant engineering teams, what's maybe the call it the 80/20 of production reliable AI? What are some of the things that teams without these huge engineering teams really, should focus on getting right um, as they're looking at deploying, AI and agents across the business?
Yeah, I think the first thing would be picking the right problem.
Yeah.
It's always going to start there. So you want to pick a problem that's high ROI, and that means problems that see a lot of frequency, problems that maybe cost the company a lot of money
Totally.
or time. Once you've done that, and then you've also evaluated that this is a good problem for the job.
Yeah, it's technically,
Yeah.
within the realm of feasibility and things of that nature, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, matching those two.
Then it's going to be your ability to test it. That's the biggest thing, and then that feedback loop as well. So that being able to observe anything that goes wrong with that, and then fix it. Um, but testing is going to be the biggest thing for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ryan, appreciate it. Again, this is just kind of a first conversation around reliable agents, and there's a lot more details that Ryan is really kind of at the forefront of leading on this stuff. And so, energized to just show you folks a window of kind of what's going on, what's possible. And Ryan, really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
All right.
Appreciate it.